Sisters and brothers in Christ, grace to you and peace from God, who is our divine parent, and Jesus Christ, our brother. Amen. Well, just a week and a half ago, I got a start of the school year inventory, a piece of paper to fill out as Maida was beginning first grade at Manns Elementary. On it, there were questions about her. Describe the personality of your child. What are their interests outside of school? Do they have any siblings or pets? Which I found to be an interesting combination, because I'm like, well, sometimes she treats her sibling as a pet. But there were some others that we filled out easily, but then I got to one which kind of caught me. And it asked, what do you hope? What do you hope your child will learn this year? What do you hope your child will learn this year? I wondered, honestly, what other parents put there in first grade. The quadratic equation, right? In all the capitals of Europe. What do you put in a space that gives you only 3 lines, right? Where you might try to fill in the hopes and dreams for your child in this school year. I realized I was overthinking things just a bit, and Maida had to get to school. And so I wrote, I hope she continues to learn to be a good friend and loves learning. But that was like the cliff note to what I would have or could have wrote. What it might have read, or it might have began to read was, well, I hope she learns to be fully herself and fully alive. I hope she learns to be strong and yet vulnerable. I hope she learns to live simply so that others might simply live. I hope that she learns to know and love the God in which she lives and moves and has her very being, and to love the people God has put in her life. I hope she learns to know and love God and to love people. Now, what is the curriculum for that? What is the roadmap? What is our guide? What forms faith in the next generation? This is actually the operating question that I have in my mind weekly, yearly, as I work and minister among you at Trinity. Because as you know, I have skin in the game. Right now, they are in the nursery wiggling and snacking and using a lot of glitter, I'm sure. But you also, whether you're actively parenting or not, you have skin in the game too, don't you? Call to mind, it just takes a second. I invite you to call to mind the children in your life, whether they are grandchildren, nieces or nephews, neighbors or friends. Just call their faces to mind. We all have skin in the game, and the church is only as effective as its buy-in from the next generation. The church as a community is only as effective as the buy-in from the next generation. And so how is faith formed in 2018? And how can we as a community of faith help till that soil so the Spirit can do her work? Earlier this week, I was at the hospital visiting, and I stopped by their beautiful display of the St. John's Bible, and it was open to Ecclesiastes. And on it, as I was reading down, it reminded me that there is nothing new under the sun, right? There's nothing new under the sun. And the concerns and the hopes that we have for our children are the same that the generations before us have had, aren't they? And so I wasn't afraid to go deep this week, like way deep into our ancient history, 400 years before Jesus, to the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah, because this book, as I encountered it last spring at a workshop, it holds an image that I think is part of the answer to this question of how we form faith in the next generation. So what's going on in Nehemiah? The video showed us a little bit. We heard these quick snippets. But the people of Israel, the Jewish people, were in captivity. They had been carried off as prisoners of war, to a distant place called Babylon. They'd been there for several generations. But then the conquerors were conquered. The Persians conquer the Babylonians, and the Persians say, you can go back. You can go back to your homeland. You can go back to Jerusalem. The question was, to what? It wasn't much. Everything was lying in ruins. But family by family, they returned. And little by little, they began to rebuild their capital, their temple, and a sense of identity as the people of Israel again. And yet, as we read in Nehemiah, the walls were still laying in ruins. And that bothered people, not just because it was a defense issue, but because it was an honor issue. And it bothered maybe no one more than Nehemiah. Nehemiah himself was not in Jerusalem. There he is. He's a cupbearer to the king of Persia, which means he's the one who tests to see if there's poison in the king's food. So he's literally by the king at every meal. He probably had a life of relative comfort. He might have been pretty happy most days, except lately he's not. And because of his proximity to the king notices. And he asks, what's up, Nehemiah? Nehemiah tells him. And before he knows it, Nehemiah has a commission to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild those walls. Never mind that he's a cupbearer, right? He's not a general contractor or construction worker. He's not a city planner. But the cupbearer has a commission to go back to Jerusalem and somehow rebuild that wall. It might have taken several months, but he finally makes it home. He's got supplies in hand and a message that it is God's hand in all of this that wants him to help rebuild the people. And somehow he unites them. He unites them to a common purpose. And they're doing well at the wall. They're building away. They're making progress. But then the tribes that surround Jerusalem, the foreign tribes, they start to get insecure about seeing what a strengthened Jerusalem might mean. And so they start to plot against Nehemiah and the Jews. They plot to come and attack them before the walls can get completed. So Nehemiah, this cupbearer, now turned army general, has a moment of tactical genius. While some are building at the wall, he stations others to guard them, but he doesn't just station them in random groups. He stations them according to their families. You could see he wrote in his own words, what did he say? At the lowest parts of the space behind the wall, I stationed people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. It wasn't just random. He put them next to the people he knew that they loved and cared about the most. And then he gives them a pep talk that any of us who have ever loved a child, it's the only pep talk you'd ever need. He says this, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your kin, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. And so picture this. The walls of Jerusalem are beginning to be reconstructed, but there's still these vulnerable low parts. And there, in those gaps between whatever lies out there and the safety within, there are parents. I put the moms there too, I can't help it. Mom and dad are there with their spears and bows. And maybe grandma and grandpa are behind, and the aunts and uncles, and the kids are inside, safe. Just try getting through that kind of barricade. When all else threatens, when it's coming at them, when they risk losing what they're just rebuilding, Nehemiah reminds them who they are fighting for, their kids, and who is fighting with them, an awesome God. And so now we can circle back to that original question. What is the curriculum, the program, the key to instilling a love of God and a love of people in the next generation? The key are their champions, their parents, those who are standing at the gaps like this, day by day, night by night, making the lunches and kissing the hurts and driving them here and there and having the conversations at the bedside. The parents who are standing at the gap of life, helping their kids navigate. On average, a church has about 40 hours per year to pour into the life of a child to influence them. Parents, on the other hand, have about 3,000. So tell me, where is faith formed? Where is faith formed? And the question is for us, what are we doing to help partner with those people that are at the front lines, who are the closest to the next generation, just trying to raise little humans? And a second question is like it, what wouldn't you do to help that next generation to know and love God? Think back on those kids that you were picturing earlier. What wouldn't you do to help them know and love God? And what would it look like to circle wagons around the parents and guardians of those kids? What would it look like if one of our primary tasks as a church community was to help parents win? Because I think that's a calling for each and every one of us. Because we profess that at this table, Christ unites us. And that there's neither slave nor Jew, there's no slave nor free, Jew nor Gentile, there's no male nor female, there's no Larson or Jablonski or Vu, right? There's just Christian family, and there's no such thing as other people's kids. The walls that we have in society, in our family unit, even our church, are lying in disrepair in so many ways. And navigating 2018 with kids for so many is overwhelming. The spear to protect them is heavy, and so are the pom-poms and the Google calendars and the car keys. It takes a village to raise our children, and don't you see, or please remember that Trinity, we are a village, trying imperfectly to live into these baptismal promises, right, that we make every time a little one is here in the water. We promise to be their people for each stage of their journey, to share with them love, and by doing so, the love of God. And so I say thanks be to God for any of you who have ever taught Sunday school or been a confirmation mentor to someone who is not your own child. Thanks be to God for any of you who help provide Bibles or fill activity bags or are part of Friends of Flynn Elementary. Thanks be to God for any who support our young adults in mission trips or are a prayer friend or who are on the safety committee. Thanks be to God for any of you who in worship greet a young person but also look up and say hi to their parents and say, "How's it going this week?" Right? You make a difference. And thanks be to God for you parents, you grandparents who are in the trenches. You need to know you are not alone. These opportunities you'll see, parenting partnership and parenting through the phases, are programmatic responses to a renewed promise on the part of Trinity to support you. But there's also a dozen other informal ways, whether it is prayer or worship or smiles shared, that we hope to be there for you. That we hope that church is not a place to bring your perfect family, but that church is a community to bring your perfectly real family to be supported. Because your combination of unconditional love with the support of a faith community, it's through that combination that the Spirit does amazing things. So what do you want the kids in your life to learn this year? How about the love of God, the love of people? Together, Trinity, we can raise the next generation. Amen.